Good morning, afternoon, or night. Geist King here, and I hope everything is going alright. Welcome to another episode of Draw and Jaw, the show where I talk about whatever the hell Michigan I want to talk about. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter America. That's right, folks. It's that time of year again where we, specimens of the good old United States of America, become belligerently, violently, obnoxiously patriotic. I won't go too far into the dry historical facts, but it's the time of year where we celebrate our forefathers telling old King George III, "No, stop that, America." There may be one or two finer details, but that's about the size of it in a nutshell. Honestly, with the way we're being taxed and what's being done with those taxes, we probably need to start thinking about a post-revolution revolution. No. What I'm actually here to talk about is what the holiday has evolved into, through a personal lens, of course. Now, America has its share of profoundly idiotic problems. We've clearly grown fat and stupid, and there's a very angry, vocal minority who uphold no principles that align with anything based in reason or even material reality. But America is a great country, flaws and all. Let's just say that there are reasons why others want to come here and other nations have mimicked our culture. Well, used to. I have a sinking feeling that a lot of the rest of the developed world is laughing at us when they're not looking on with perplexed befuddlement. But I'll leave that there before I go on a long rambling rant about how the country has gone to hell and how the whole West End used to be nothing but trees when I was younger. Veering back on topic, though some groups are trying to beat the patriotism out of the baby Americans, most of us still come together to salute old brother Jonathan. So sit back and relax while I have a chinwag about one of the holidays that brings us together as a common nation instead of dividing us by our arbitrary differences. Also, watch me draw Sophia Spumoni Rizzo in an Old Glory bikini. Who says you can't be ripped, goth, and patriotic? America. Now, I've always had an appreciation of the 4th of July holiday. Even when I was an angsty teenager about 758 years ago, I could get on board with a day off from school, shoveling copious amounts of barbecue and hot-baked beans into my mouth, and that's Southern barbecue, by the way. My mother and my aunts always used to have a saying before they served you some incredible food. Old Mater still utters it to this day when handing me something home-cooked. "Put my foot in it," they would always say with beaming pride. Now, I'm hardwired to start salivating when someone talks about putting their feet in food. Saying that out loud actually sounds like some sort of weird degeneracy I want no part of. But anyway, that's usually what the holiday boils down to for most of us. An excuse to gather and eat in someone's backyard, at a lake, or wherever you can. Hell, as an adult, that's about my experience for most of my life at this point when it comes to the holiday. But once upon a time, in a simpler time in the 90s, I can remember one absolutely wild 4th of July night. See, I'm a Southern boy with Midwestern sensibilities. Back in about 1992, my mom took my brother and I up north for living. But during that 11 years of living, we crossed back over the Mason-Dixon line from time to time to visit kinfolk for a spell. It was always a lot of fun before my teen years when all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends and be near the girls I liked. But before the petulant, moody angst that comes stock standard with pre-adults, I always had a good time in the South. I mean, in the 90s, I had a brother a year younger than myself and two cousins around the same age. And of course, in that time period, we were legally obligated to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which means that we were not only inseparable, but master stick swingers. I've defeated many imaginary Foot Clan soldiers in my day. sort of a Grandmaster Ninja, and, no big deal. I was Leonardo, and, it's whatever. Ladies, please don't throw your panties. No, I say that to say this. We were thick as thieves, and whenever my brother and I visited our old hometown, it was like the team was back together. As soon as we saw each other, we'd throw up our hands and shout cowabunga, then run off to do some boy stuff. We wouldn't wait half an hour because we displayed turtle power. Well, on one visit, we arrived on the 4th, me expecting the most complicated thing I'd be dealing with would be stuffing myself with as much food at the family barbecue as I could without getting sick, and finding 2 sticks that I could dual wield as twin ninjakin. But oh boy, was I mistaken. See, our little slice of Americana could barely be called a town. It had 1 traffic light in the center, a single grocery store, a corner store, and a pecan tree in front of the elementary school. The nearest Walmart was half an hour out of town. So you can imagine that nothing much happens there that I knew of at the time. The Civ and I hadn't lived there since I was about 6 or 7 years old. And at that point, I was probably about to turn 10 in a few days. On the 7th, my birthday, July 7th. Drama. So, we were out of the loop. I guess the adults gave us a little wiggle room since we were getting a little older, because that night we were able to go to the center of town on our own to set off fireworks with the other children. This was profoundly different from what I was used to. To that point, I'd always set off fireworks under the supervision of a nearby uncle. And even then, it was only stuff like poppets, snappers, pop-pops, and sparklers, with the occasional bottle rocket, carefully aimed away from the cotton fields just outside of town. Old Mater would always say, "They better come get that popcorn," when we'd pass by the fields in bloom. Since she, and coincidentally enough, my last boss chopped cotton in those exact same fields at different points in their lives. But veering back on topic again, we 4 little turtle boys, or partners in crime, if you will, that's a deep cut, were marching up the street toward the center of town, lugging backpacks absolutely filled to the brim with enough boom boom to burn down the town. It never even occurred to me to ask where all these fireworks even came from. I was just so amazed at the sheer magnitude and variety I was pack-muling. In retrospect, it was likely 1 or 2 of my maternal uncles who funded our little arsenal. I can't see the women folk even approving of a third of what we were carrying. I mean, there were the little packages of pop-pops and snappers I was used to, sprinkled in there for seasoning, but there was some serious go-boom in those bags. There was a crazy assortment of bottle rockets, from those little black cat rockets with the red stems to those big honking Texas pop rockets. It was full of tons of those little red firecrackers that looked like mini sticks of dynamite. There were Roman candles in a variety of sizes. I thought I was gonna be Super Mario after finding a fire flower. All that in a variety of little cylinders with fuses I didn't even have the capacity to identify at the time. My brother and cousins were super excited while I'm standing there wide-eyed and slack-jawed, feeling like the cheap little disposable lighter in my hip pocket was a detonator to a doomsday device. But before I could begin formulating my plan for world domination with a little Jansport full of fireworks, I vividly remember being snapped out of my scheming when I caught a whiff of that gunpowdery, sulfury smell on the wind as we got closer to the center of town. That's when I realized I could hear faint popping and laughter in the distance. Needless to say, that the sound of a good time in the distance made me instantly forget about threatening the government for control. And it seemed like it took forever to get there, though. I guess since my legs were much shorter, it felt like it took us, about 10 minutes to get down there. Actually, last time I was there was for the repast following my brother's funeral a few years back. And that same walk from the center of town to that same cousin's house only took about 3 minutes tops. Not like the distance between 2 points anywhere in that town is a particularly long walk. You can throw a rock from any of the borders and hit the traffic light at the center. But anyway, we got to where we were going, and the whole area is just filled with giggling children setting off fireworks. I personally hadn't seen that many kids gathered in one place since I actually attended the Head Start program when I was like 4, kind of like a kindergarten before kindergarten. And it was a literal blast, or series of blasts. We just jumped right in and started blowing our non-metaphorical load all over the place. It was great, until things inevitably went south. You see, it turns out that when you grant access to explosive materials to pre-adults who are just shy of about 15 to 20 years of fully developed brains, things can get, well, explosive. It didn't take too terribly long for someone to fire the shot heard around the world, if you will. You see, someone brought something a little nastier than what should have been out there. Some bit of boom that was just on the south side of the line of legality. I remember hearing someone's panicked voice calling out. There was a clear portent of material danger in it, so ignoring it never even crossed anyone's mind. Whoever it was yelling at someone and then into the crowd to disperse. Apparently, someone threw something into the crowd and hadn't realized how serious it actually was. I can't remember the exact name of the little explosive, but it had to be something akin to a silver salute or an M80, maybe even a bit bigger. But luckily, no one within earshot had to be told twice to move, and they scattered away from the hissing thing before it exploded much bigger than anything anyone had seen all night. There was a stunned pause for all of about 3 whole seconds before some of the bigger boys who almost got caught in the blast started lighting bottle rockets and aiming them at who they thought was the culprit. Not everybody knew what was going on, and let's just say that particular eye for an eye was about to leave the whole world blind. And before we even knew it, it was full-on war. A bright, beautifully colored war. Well, war implies neatly organized factions defending or asserting something, but this was more akin to chaos. I don't think the whole thing lasted more than 5 or 10 minutes, but it got pretty scary. Kids weren't aiming for the sky or the asphalt anymore. They were aiming for flesh. It felt like taking a step in any direction would put you on top of a landmine. But you sure as hell didn't want to be standing still. There was so much ruckus that the police were on us before we even realized it. Now, this just made everyone instantly stop what they were doing and scatter like roaches when the lights come on. Hell, a lot of us didn't really even do anything wrong and just got caught in the chaos, but when you're a kid, the instinct to avoid getting in trouble is strong. Luckily, my cousin's brother and I stayed pretty close to each other the whole time, so we never lost track of one another. But we got out of Dodge when the cops showed up. I don't remember who was leading us, but we ended up looping around the main street and ended up sprinting through backyards before we made it back to their house. It was wild. The last thing I even remember about that night was standing in their backyard trying to catch my breath and feeling like I was choking on the sulfur stench. And I remember noticing under the illumination of the back floodlight that we all had a couple black burn marks on our clothes too. It really is a good thing that most of us only had firepower for the ceremony and not the cemetery. That could have gone way worse than it actually did. And I actually wrote Once upon a time, I actually wrote a college paper on this experience and dug it out to help jog my memory a bit. And it turned out to be a nice refresher, but great Cthulhu is it dramatized. It reads like a schlocky action B movie, complete with one-liners, military jargon, inspirational speeches, and casual comparisons to the Vietnam War. In that version of reality, we were aged up to teenagers, all still lived in the same town, and there was no mention of me even having a sibling. I remember routinely burning the candle at both ends for the brief time I was at university. I guess my fatigued, roasted mind thought the professor would buy any of that. But that's pretty much my most memorable 4th of July anecdote, the truthful version of it anyway. Like I said earlier, these days, it's just hanging out and eating with friends at the lake. Not a bad way to spend the day, but nothing interesting enough to regale a riveted audience with. I've already been going on long, so I'm going to wrap this up. Why don't you guys share some of your 4th of July stories in the comments, if you have some interesting ones? And remember, if you'd like to support me, come follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or donate a little something to the coffee if it pleases you. Links are below. Happy Independence Day, fellow patriots. I'll see you guys in the next one. And most importantly, draw my OC. America.